Hello and welcome to Critical Faculty. Today I don't have just a guest, I have a friend. Somebody who I met only mere months ago, but we've become very good friends over the last few weeks, and we enjoy a chat or two every now and then. So I'd like you please to welcome David McDonald. How are you, David?
Hey everyone. I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. Very excited to be here, especially because I decided to bring a drink of my own, and I'm going to crack open a bottle. Well, finish off the bottle, I should say, of Johnny Walker Black, Christopher Hitchens' favorite drink. So, thanks everyone for coming out. Enjoy the night together.
Thank you. I've got my vodka, so we're ready to go. Um,
Nice.
and it's this is the first time I'm actually talking to somebody in down under with me in Australia. Everybody is like I'm probably you're the same. You're waking up in ungodly hours and early in the morning or crazy late. US and Europe, and now we're in Australia. So it's nice 9 p.m. tonight.
It is a nice time to be drinking alcohol. For those who don't know about my channel, I have drinks with people as a drink of their choice, but most of my guests are in America, and so sometimes I'm drinking. I've had vodka at 7 a.m., like just straight vodka, and I've had coffee at 1 p.m. I know 1 a.m. So woken up in the middle of the night and had coffee, and then I had to go back to sleep right after that. So yeah, it's a wild experience to be drinking at an appropriate time right now.
Yeah, it is
It's
difficult.
awesome.
Yeah, imagine having like alcohol for breakfast. That's a bit tough.
It is.
Especially if you were drinking the night before. So
Yeah. So some people, they'll go like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't drink. I can't," and people can have non-alcoholic drinks or deep drinks, but they say, "Oh, I can't drink." I'm like, "No, thank you." Like, I'm so sick of being drunk on a Saturday morning. Like, I'm so sick of it.
So
Like, you have no
in
idea.
your podcast, you match everybody. So they're drinking. Do
Yeah.
you, do you have to drink the same drink they're drinking?
Yeah. I make sure and people say, "Why don't you fake it and stuff?" I don't want to fake because
Yeah,
the drink sets the tone of the interview. I don't want to be like drunk and the other person's not drunk, or you want to kind of match each other's energy. And I also people like bring a drink that kind of represents them. So sometimes I get people who really put a lot of thought into it. And Captain Dadpool, it's good to see you here. It's good to see you. But yeah, it's one of those things where I just match the drink. Yeah. So I think I ordered with I have Secular Rarity coming on soon, and he's like, "Oh, I really love these craft beers from like this local brewery near where I live."
all right.
And I ordered 2 beers. It cost me $45 to get them, and
All right.
I'm getting them delivered. But I've got 2 single beers for $45. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
You know what happens if you drank craft beer in Australia? The way people will look at you here, it's you're an outsider, really.
no, no way. I drink heaps of craft beer. But you're from Victoria, right? So
Yeah.
you guys drink VB.
No, I hate VB. I don't. I'm more of a pure blonde, which is a low calorie, because
Yeah.
after it's like 6 or 7 pints of normal beer, you're so bloated. So I'm
Mm.
going for the low carb, and then after 7 or 8 pints of beer, that's a big session of a night. Then I'll start drinking vodkas for the rest of the
Mm.
night.
Yeah,
That's my
it is
routine.
nice.
Yeah, I'm actually going to display your lovely channel here for people to be aware
Oh,
of.
thanks.
And this is the Deep Drinks. It used to be called Deep Drinks Podcast. You've removed the podcast from it, or?
Yeah, so majority of it is podcast, but we're moving into like doing other things, like we're doing panels and debates. Um, well, I was thinking about doing this thing called deep drink driving with Dave, where I would play truck driver simulator while
Oh, wow.
drinking a drink just by myself, and engaging with the audience. People could call in, and then if I crash, the stream ends just abruptly. So it'd be called deep drink driving, but probably not going to do that, but it's just a funny idea. But yeah, this is the channel, and mainly it's the podcast, but we're doing panels. Like we just did a purity culture panel where we talked about purity culture. We had so you're right there. We had a bunch of people on there. We had a marriage therapist, and we had a pastor turned porn star on the panel. So Nicole Mitchell, that was a really interesting. She had a really interesting perspective because she went through purity culture, but now she's talking about like doing orgies and like like it was a very wild panel. It was good. It was good
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are. I don't think I'll have your your bravery, you and Derek. Something Derek and Derek. I remember Derek had his wife glued next to him, so just in case if he misbehaves, you know.
I sent Derek a message and I was like, and I took a screenshot of that one, and I said, this is Derek and Ryan debating whether or not they should start an OnlyFans, because they just look so serious. They're just like, and they're like, it's just like, oh, and he just laughed. Yeah, but I think Ryan was actually excited about that one because it's interesting. And you know what? Like, I tell people like about, you know, the stuff. You know, I'm interviewing someone about scholarship, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing on your podcast?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm interviewing this person, and we're talking about like the Exodus from Egypt and how, you know, the archaeological evidence or something." And they'll be like, "What's the Exodus?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know, like you Moses." And they're like, "What?" But like, what? And like, they're already drifting off. No one cares in the real world. And then I'm saying, "Oh, I was a pastor to porn star." And they're like, "Oh my God, that sounds interesting. Whoa, that's crazy." And then people tune in. So yeah, it's one of the episodes that has a broader reach, I guess.
Yeah,
Most
it's
people
and it's. I'm glad you mentioned this point, and it's a very good point of contention because we're talking about historical stuff that happens, and a lot of people, especially the younger generation, say like, "Sorry, what is that to do with me nowadays?" But there is a very strong linkage between yesteryear's beliefs, you know, i.e., Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and that connection of today's population who believe maybe slightly differently. Maybe, you know, everything evolves, including thoughts and ideas, but it still lingers in one way. It takes different forms. But if you belong to a church, and I'll start by asking you, which Christian denomination were you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to comment quickly and say that I think we're living in a post-truth world. I think especially with AI and stuff, like the next generation, like my son's going to grow up like trying to separate fact from fiction is just gonna, like something needs to change. Otherwise, like no one's going to know what is real anymore, especially with like how AI can manipulate stuff. But what church I was involved with, I was involved with a Pentecostal church. So
Oh,
we believed in speaking in tongues. I spoke in tongues. I can still speak in tongues. Laying on of hands for healing, feeling the presence of the Holy Spirit or God in worship. We would say prophecies. Yeah, everything like that. We didn't do
so
this. We didn't do the snake handling and the drinking of poison, but
yeah.
we got, you know, we everything but that essentially. Yeah.
So you're officially a polyglot. You speak different languages. You speak multi languages. I've never
No.
under. Well, you believed it then. Like, obviously, you weren't
I
faking it.
I don't. Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking, but I don't know if I ever thought they were worldly languages. I thought it was like a spirit language, like because it's like like it's just that was rusty, but like, you know, like it's just kind of words. Like
Yeah,
I don't know how to explain.
sounds.
Like I
The
never
random
thought like,
sounds.
yeah, I never thought that like, oh, I was just like speaking some like African tribe language or something. Like I never thought that, but.
But it defeats the
Um,
whole idea of a language. A language is devised to communicate meaning. So if you are speaking in a language that's supposed to be heavenly, but it does not carry any meanings, why call it a language? Because what does it do then? Other than
well,
impress the hell out of the other person saying, "What the hell? That sounds weird."
Well, I can tell you, Hanny. Let me take a sip. So the reason is because, so do you remember? And I'm going to give you the I used to be a youth pastor, right? So I can give you the youth pastor ministry college concept. So remember when Moses was in the desert, and God said to him, "Speak to the rock and make it pour forth water," and he didn't. He decided to smack it with his his rod, and then it poured forth water. And God said to him, I might be getting these details wrong. Someone's going to correct me, but and then God said to him, because you did that, because you didn't speak to the rock, because you whacked it instead, you're not going to enter the promised land. Which is kind of God going back on his word, but we'll just forget about that part. Um, so so he whacks the rock, and instead of speaking to it. And the idea was God was trying to teach us the power of our words back then. So there is life and death in the power of the tongue. When with Pentecostal Christianity, we believe that we didn't pray to God for God to do things to us. We did things through the power of the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
That was a gift from God. In other words, it's actually a really interesting loophole, because you can get like, why is there suffering in the world? Exactly. Get out there, Christians, and start changing the world. Get out there, Christians, and start praying. God isn't going to do stuff. We need to do stuff. And I even learned there was even a person who had some sort of, I will describe it as some sort of medical event in the place that I live, and he wrote 3 pages of prophecy. He was like someone on the Sunshine Coast here. And in that, he said that he didn't believe in angels or anything like that. But when he had this medical thing, angels came into the room, and God told him to speak in tongues, and he never spoke in tongues before, so he did. And then the angels started like flying off into different directions, and they would come back. And then he asked God what was happening. He said, "Well, you're telling them what to do." And he's like, God can't intervene because that breaks free will. You don't know what's happening in the spirit realm because you're not this perfect spiritual being. So you need a language. Like God created this world where you still need to speak something into existence in order to make it work. So you speak the language of the Holy Spirit, which is speaking in tongues, and then that creates that commands angels and principalities and takes back ground from the enemy and does all this kind of stuff. That's the idea behind it, and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we've got in Islam, a mixed Muslim and ex-Christian via mother-father situation, which is a bizarre place to be. But to me, this was an area of inquiry for me, because we're talking about a divine language here, and we understand how languages are made and evolve. They evolve over time, and they change over time. And the idea.
The Tower of Babel, you could, some people don't believe
that's how God, that's how they changed the tongues, but that's the religious narrative. I'm talking about the
reality narrative,
the development of language and stuff like that. But there is another epistemic problem where it's not that almighty for me, because to speak a word and for something to happen, there is a time delay. So if your ability to change something is via saying a magic word and then that thing changes accordingly, that takes a bit of time. However, a stronger or a more powerful deity would be able to wish things in their heads, and that thing happens simultaneously without any delay. And that would be a lot more superior. In Islam, the God Allah, apparently, he has to utter a word as well, but he has to say the word be, and then the things then is. But there is a magic word. But for me, a telepathy, something like Charles Xavier on his wheelchair in X-Men, is a little bit more stronger, because he does not need to say words. He uses the fundamental thing that languages are devised to carry or portray, which is language. But language were their afterthoughts. Your thoughts are there prior to language. We thought before we spoke. Languages are only about 50, 70,000 years old, and Homo sapiens are about 300,000 years old. But we know that even prior to Homo sapien, from the Australopithecus afarensis and Africanus, they were able of thought, and then languages came. So for me, for God, and that carries on, because he has to portray his ideas to humanity again through language and written scripture, rather than the one thing that he's given his devil, which is being able to communicate directly through thought. So what do you reckon? I mean, because language has a lot of created a lot of problems. All the religious denominations in Christianity and Islam and Judaism, it's because of interpretations of the text. People perceive spoken words differently and have different meanings for them, and then you end up with people fighting over what's the meaning of something. But if God communicated through the fundamental thing that languages are trying to approximate, just thought, he would have been a lot more successful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like a classic problem. I find it's like, why were things written down? There is an argument. I could play devil's advocate. I asked Megan Lewis this, who's a Christian, a seriologist, and she said, I said, where in the Bible does it say anywhere in the scripture that we should compile all of the scriptures into one book and then use that to argue about abortion rights and LGBT issues and things like that. Like nowhere does it say to compile everything. Like where we kind of canonize the Bible out of our own I don't know, like we just decided, I guess, our own decision. But like, what if like is an alternative? Like let's say that some of the Bible is accurate, and let's hypothetically grant that Christianity is true or something. Like God, like Jesus, or God gave us the Holy Spirit to witness to people. What if that was his plan? What if it was actually the devil's work to compile the Bible? Because like it confuses everyone, people have different interpretations. There's 45,000 branches of Christianity. Like if I was to ever be a Christian again, I think I would be that type of Christian that just goes like, I'm kind of like mystical. I just go, yeah, I felt some nice things in church, and therefore like that the Bible's not a good thing, and like I don't know. I'd be very
but even if it's the devil, you could argue if the devil is the one doing it, you go, okay, well, if the devil is doing it, well, isn't God omniscient? Like, did he not know that he was about to do that? And if he's a lot more powerful, then he should be able to stop him. This is the same devil that worked with him against Job, by the way.
Yeah. It's what's that? There's a like a number of like, I think it's, I'm gonna get this number wrong, but I think it's 2.49 something million, like 2.4 million people God killed in the Bible, and Satan killed 10. And Satan killed 10 with God's permission. And they were Job's like family. So it's like 2.5 billion. And that's not including Noah's flood, by the way. That's just including the numbers that we have for like, and God smited 45 people here, and God killed all 150,000, and like it's literally the actions of God, or when God commanded his people to go do certain things, but like direct.
Well, when you think about it, actually, every single person who died, God was responsible of, because we were not supposed to die at all. It's just because two random people, which biology assures us that because of something called minimum founding population, it could not possibly, humanity could have never stemmed from only a male or female in biology. So that story aside, we were supposed to be living forever. Death has only entered the realm because of that disobeyal, and therefore it was a curse. God cursed humanity that they will die and suffer. So therefore, it doesn't matter. Every single person who dies, even natural death, is God's responsibility. He deemed it to be so.
Yeah. I mean, there is just so much, there are so many theological problems that you can only get around by accepting it as true, and then just, we can't even you're not getting around them. You're just kind of, the old saying I used to hear all the time. Well, we can ask him when we meet him. It's God's ways are above our ways. P. Barnes is one of the moderators in Deep Drinks Discord. Hey, P. Barnes. And Dr. Cheryl, it's good to see you here too. And 0125AR, I see your face. I don't know your name, but I see your face all the time in the comments. It's good to see you here. And Sylvia Corbett, good to see you here too. There's some people come over from my chat. This is cool.
That's brilliant. It's good to see your followers are really keen on your conversation. That's brilliant to see. But it's very confusing. Is God loving, or is he ruling with an iron fist? Because especially in Christianity, Judaism and Islam are very similar. Their gods are quite harsh. We're talking about the baby boomer type of father, the cold, the detached. He might hit you every now and then, even for your own sake. He's trying to prepare you for a harsh reality. So they say they love you, but they still beat you up because
it's 50s dad. Takes his belt off and whacks a piece of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But then comes even a worse type of dad. That's hippie type of dad. He says, "I love you, but you're a dickhead. You're not good enough in front of your mate. Well, you'll never amount to anything."
There is an argument to be made that because you do think of the New Testament God as like a softer, nicer idea of God. Well, God's on it. This is something Dr. Francesca Stefanopoulou says is God isn't there in the New Testament. He's disappeared. He's not interacting with his people. It's all about Jesus. But if we accept Jesus as God and we accept the perspective of the New Testament, God feels like he's softened a lot. There's no more smiting, and in God's there's the beautiful, the Beatitudes and the beautiful like sayings of Jesus on the Mount of Olives. But one thing that the Old Testament didn't have, which I think makes it all the much worse than the New Testament, is they didn't have hell in the Old Testament. There was no eternal punishment. You died, you died. Like there was no eternal soul. I've got an episode with Dr. Matthew Munger on this. There's no eternal soul in the Old Testament. You lived your life, you died, and that was it. The New Testament brings in this, and you could argue that it was a misunderstanding, but the church has definitely accepted this idea of eternal paradise and eternal punishment, which I don't know how someone could, like, I don't know if I could be in eternal bliss knowing that my neighbor is an eternal punishment. Like, I just don't see how I could get around that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how I could be okay with knowing that. Like, it's like having a party with like all this food, drinks and sushi and I don't know, whatever else is nice in the world, and then knowing outside that there's like a starving person, like right outside the door, but that's like billions of people. Like, I just don't know if I could be enjoying the sushi inside,
But you know
for
what?
eternity.
I've got to be honest. We do that.
Well, we do that, yeah, but how do you wait? How do you mean? How do you mean?
When Michael Jackson and the people sang "We Are the World, We Are the Children," they were trying to collect some money for Africa. The problem's still there. There are people who eat up to 5,000 calories a day in today's world, and there are people who literally, children, starve to death. So it is happening
Yeah.
still, and we still
So I guess
and billionaires of this world are on their yachts having parties. So unfortunately, yes, some humans.
But so yeah, I would agree with you there. But I'm not in eternal bliss. I'm not in like a perfect. I feel bad about that. I feel horrible about that. That there are people that are starving, and that the environment is like get warming up and things like that. Like, I make decisions in my life to try and obfuscate some of those things, even animal suffering. But I feel bad about that. But eternal bliss means you couldn't feel bad about something in eternal bliss, where you were just right, like you're just happy, like there is no more pain, there's no more suffering. I just don't know I just don't know if I could achieve that, knowing that that someone was suffering forever.
But apparently, God and when I spoke with Jonathan Pierce, and I think I need to hook you up. He's a brilliant English.
He's coming on. I've been talking to him today. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant. He's a good friend of mine. We covered the 30 arguments against the existence of God. And I came up with in a podcast, I came up with a term that he said he's going to steal and put in his book. And I called it divine lobotomy, where basically when you go to heaven, your memories are empty. You no longer remember who you are.
Yeah.
Because, and then I've argued, if you are not the same person, because who you are is the total sum of your memories, your experiences, everything. If I take that away, and there's a brilliant movie by Jim Carrey, called The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where people going through traumas of life, and they go to a doctor where they extract all their memories so they don't feel bad about breakups or deaths and things like that.
It's like a Rick and Morty episode.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But then is it actually you who enters heaven or hell, for that matter? If you're actually emptied and you're like an empty vessel, that is incredible. I mean, I've never understood that, because to me, you, David, you can't be just David without all your memories and the things that makes you David.
And then, do the people who go to hell, do they get to keep their memories? Because that would be more painful to know what you did have, right?
Well, it depends. Well, if they're remembering a threesome, it might actually
Yeah.
it feels like that was actually good, But that's the thing. I mean, what do you? I mean, some of the more sophisticated heavens and hells, or in different theologies, is you remembering bad things and having to relive them. The
Mm,
trauma of reliving something bad you've done
mm.
over and over. It's almost like an eternal loop. That actually makes more sense, and it's a more psychological thing rather than the stupid burning of people's skin. I mean, the Quran, we have a verse in the Quran where it says, God, after you burn in hell, it keeps renewing your skin so you can actually die over and over again to eternity.
How beautiful. How loving and kind.
Poetic, poetic. Uh, and the Muslim friend saying this is a scientific miracle because apparently the pain area is right under the skin, which is incorrect.
Oh,
There-
scientific
yeah,
miracle. It's miracle. It's
yeah,
another one of the Quran's amazing miracles. And yeah, it's so. Oh, jeez. You know, like if sorry to get like grim, but if I was to get like a kitten, right, and I was to like hold the kitten down and start like sticking needles through its like skin and start like suffocating it and holding it underwater, every single person in the chat here would be like would violently stop me from doing that. They would be like, that's disgusting. How dare you? Let's say I was doing that to a rat, like something that most people kill just in their house. Most likely, almost everyone in the chat would violently stop me from doing that. They would be disgusted that I would torture a creature. Imagine me doing that for eternity. And then imagine me doing that, but like 10 times worse, setting it on fire, lighting matches and holding it under its like little chin and all that stuff. That's a fucking rat. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear. That's a rat.
no,
That's
it's
not a
okay.
human being. Think about that, a human being going through that for eternity. Think about every human being that has ever lived has gone through that for eternity. And I'm sorry to be really, really crass here. Can I be really crass? Like
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah. This
okay,
is
great.
this is not a PC show.
But okay, and a little bit of a trigger warning. But there's if you know you have with the concept of heaven and hell, you have a rape victim that gets raped, and she doesn't go to heaven unless she forgives her rapist, and the rapist can go to heaven a-okay, but she can go to hell if she can't forgive her rapist. Like what kind of a like remember hell, like remember the torture of this little mouse, this little rat, and how disgusted and how violent everyone would be if I started doing that right now. Think about that for a human. Like it's just and think about that for a rape victim
Well,
or
well, if a
someone.
human does that, you think there's something wrong with the brain. There
Yeah.
are some people who are born as a psychopath, and the prefrontal lobe cortex area, which is the most recent area in development of the brain in general. If that amygdala or the couple of areas around it they're not aligned properly, you end up with somebody who's got no ability to feel empathy. Serial killers have that sort of thing. They actually can't feel empathy. They are
Mm,
freaks of nature. They're actually victims themselves. They've done nothing wrong. Unfortunately, we have to put them away one way or another just to stop them from harming society, not to take revenge, because unfortunately they've inherited something and they had no say in the matter. But
mm,
they're sick. So when they start doing that, they're sick. We need to isolate them from society so they will not do that again.
mm,
Uh, Otherwise, most of our actions are motivated by a reason. We even when we hit someone, there is a reason for it. We don't do it for the hell of it. If you do it for the hell of it, you are categorized as a psychopath.
mm,
Gods, for somebody to do things for 20 or 30 years, and then end up punishing them where there is no opportunity for rehabilitation. That's why we punish these days. It's rehabilitation or isolation. We no longer take revenge. Retribution is something of the dark ages. We stopped doing that. It's not the right motivation. But for God to do that to somebody, or not to somebody, to the vast majority of human population, 110 billion people. That's the last account since Homo sapien, 300,000 years ago, and still counting. 99%, and he has foresight of that. He is going to be sitting on a throne of howling and screaming human beings being burned forever. That's his future. Why would a wise brain choose that as a future? It's beyond me.
It's very strange. I remember when I got saved, I became known as Captain Christian at school. I used to run Bible studies. The
How old
chaplain
were
gave
you?
me 16.
16.
Yeah, and I used to run Bible studies, and I used to get the keys of the chaplain, and we would open up a classroom and would bring people in. And I remember a friend's girlfriend came along to it one time, and I basically was like going on about like how all our friends are going to hell. And like,
Oh
we
my
need to
God.
do something about it. And then my mate, his name's Keegan, and my mate goes, yeah, so my girlfriend came along, and apparently the whole time you just talked about how all her friends are going to hell. And I was just like, yeah. Well, it's like, I had no answers too. It was just kind of like I was been a bit of a downer. Like, well, all our friends are going to hell. We better do something about it. Like, and yeah, it's just wild to think back to that. It's like, it's very much this us versus them mentality that you kind of adapt in church and Christianity.
Well, isn't that sort of one of Jesus's messages? And a lot of people have interpreted this in a different way, that you can't get to me unless you hate your family. And the
Yeah.
word, because they're all saying that's not hate. It means dislike. But the Greek word, I looked up, the Greek word was missio, and the missio is Greek word for hate, literally hate. It's not a dislike, or it's actually literally hate. And it's a very strange, because it's trying to tear you apart, and create groups within groups where and animosity is created.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's very much when I was a Christian, we used to go up on top of. I used to live in Noosa. I live very close to Noosa now.
Beautiful place.
Yeah, have you been there?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. You're in Melbourne, yeah?
I'm in Melbourne, but we come, my wife and I, we love Queensland. It's, for those who don't know the geography of Australia, this is, your beaches and yeah.
Are you like near the CBD in Melbourne?
Yeah. I'm about 6 kilometers from the CBD.
Oh, okay. We don't know if we'll be able to, but we're coming down soon. We should catch up for a beer or something.
Oh, wow.
But we have a baby with us, so it might be hard. But we'll talk in DMs anyway.
We'll have you for dinner at my place. So if your wife's coming, so introduce her to my wife.
Okay, yeah, that could be cool. Again, we got the baby and we're staying a bit out of town, but we'll try and work something. It will be cool. But so I used to go up to the top of Mount Timbiwa, if you don't know that mountain, and it looks over all of Noosa. And we used to have prayer meetings up there. And we used to pray over all of Noosa to, get it saved. And I remember thinking, I remember specifically praying against the adult shop that popped up in Tewantin, which is the town that I lived in inside of Noosa. And I was like, oh, there's the perverts, and it's a spiritual stronghold by the enemy. And then it shut down. And I was like, yes. It shut down, but it wasn't a shutting down. It was a renovation. They were growing bigger. so yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Pinch, for becoming a new channel member. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Things like that, guys, and if you go to David's channel one more time, things like that would help. David, your channel is only
what do you do for membership?
I was
gonna say, what do you do for members? Because I've been trying to get members for like 2 months now, just essentially begging people, and everyone's like, no. No one wants
and that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say to people, please consider becoming members of channels like this, because it's. I mean, and Anna, you start with mine is starts with $1 a month. crazy stuff like like an initiate. But what it does, it's psychological. As you're a content creator, you feel appreciated. You feel that you're driven. It's very little, but it goes towards you trying to be geared up for the next show. You want to create contents. You want to bring people, and some of the things that people don't understand, that you would probably end up getting lecturers who would actually start charging you. You'll actually have to pay them to come to your channel.
I've already had people like I've had 2 guests ask for payment. I've paid both of them. But not only that, I spend a lot of money on alcohol and the a Canvas subscription and a Premiere subscription, and like I'm running in the red majorly.
Yes.
But like Captain Dadpool became a Patreon subscriber the other day, and it was like $5. It's not like it's not like it doesn't what I'm saying is the value isn't like it doesn't matter hugely, but it was just having like it totally picked up my night. I was like, yes, I got this. Like I felt so much better, because it's like people actually care enough to even just give a few bucks a month. That's amazing. So thank you, Captain Dadpool, if you're still watching. I really like that. Really changed my my mood that night. Made me feel.
And it's not just that, but once they become members and you've got enough members, content creators will start creating special contents for members, different tiers. Like, for example, I've got a gold tier where I can actually have that person as a guest on my channel for 60 minutes talking about whatever topic they want to talk about. Maybe promoting their own young channel. And things like that. So it's not like a membership towards nothing. With the different tiers, you get, and this is the trick, you give them extra bonuses. And I'm a member of different channels, and I enjoy the contents, and that's the way to sort of support them. So thank you very much again, Pinch, and hopefully you enjoyed the contents.
What did I say Captain Dadpool?
Yes.
He's saying Captain Who? I want my $5 back. Did I say it wrong?
Yeah, you said Captain Dadpool. Did you mean somebody? Did you mean somebody else?
No, I did. I meant Captain Dadpool, but he's saying, or maybe I said it wrong. I don't know. I honestly, I was saying this before I was streaming. I was like, I might be getting the flu. I'm calling you Captain Daddypool from now on. And also, right. Captain Dadpool is coming on the channel, so very shortly. We were talking right before this about him coming on. So yeah.
Yeah, but for people who enjoy these conversations, like I'm going to Neil deGrasse Tyson in Melbourne. He's coming to Melbourne. I'm paying about $1,200 for a meet and greet, a couple of tickets for myself and my wife, dinner and meet and greet with him. Because I'm trying to lure him into my channel, see if I can lure him to spend even 20 minutes on my channel.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. To have we sometimes pray to Neil deGrasse Tyson on my channel. We say thank you, Neil, for giving us the scientific method. Because he did, and yeah, that's what. And please look after us. So
yeah. So what I'm saying is, when you go and spend that much money, but then you have an academic coming to a channel. And like a Bart Ehrman, or and you get to see them in the flesh. You get to ask them questions. You get to listen to them directly. Instead of spending hundreds of dollars and having to find parking and all that crap that comes with going to a venue, you're sitting in your pajama and your couch and with your headphones, and you're listening to a lecture. And I think it will be quite nice. And I think Derek runs this quite successfully, whereby people contribute a small thing, and it's the psychological effect that would have on the content creator, that I feel appreciated, I feel like I'm doing something valuable, and you recoup a little bit of your expenses along the way.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of support in the channel on the comments. Thank you, everyone. But I also see some criticism from Digital Hammurabi. If we could bring that up, that'd be fantastic. Here's the problem. This David cannot even instantiate the necessary preconditional ultimacy of essential provisions for impossible possibilities of the impossible. Typical atheists.
That's not Digital Hammurabi. That's Jordan Peterson speaking.
No, it's Darth Dawkins talking. It's Darth Dawkins talking point.
That's Jordan Peterson. It depends what you mean by God.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the bottom of this. What do you mean by David? What do you mean by cannot? What do you mean by even? What do you mean by instantiate? Yeah. Oh,
You gotta love Jordan Peterson.
you do. He's a
Word
meme.
salad master.
He's like do you know what? He's not that bad. I was gonna say he's Deepak Chopra levels of bad. Do you know who is Deepak Chopra levels of bad that I just can't stand? Russell
Deepak
Brand.
Chopra, the guy with the glasses with the encrusted diamonds in it. It's like almost like Elton John type of glasses.
Yeah. But Russell Brand, he does the same thing. Like he'll just use words that don't make any sense that rhyme together, like he's rapping, and you're like, what are you even saying? Like it's very hard to get to the bottom of what he's trying to say.
Deepak Chopra had the infamous debate that had Sam Harris, Michael Shermer, and he had with him a woman called Jane, who was absolutely weird. Not like she was like somebody you meet in a sort of a fortune teller type of person. And these guys are talking about quantum mechanics, and she's like completely talking about the reincarnation of queens and kings of the past. It was but then Deepak Chopra talked about quantum mechanics and he butchered it
so bad. And then what's worse is I think it's not the one. I think Sam Harris gets up and he's like, I have no idea what you actually just said. I'm going to ask you a question. Like, this is a simple question, and like, just give me an answer that I can, because like they're perfect wordsmiths at like throwing out words that make you feel a certain way, but you can't actually pin anything down. Like you're looking for something to pin down, and then they're at the end of their sentence, and you're like, oh, you've already said what you're going to say. There's a bunch of people who agree with you. You could ask 100 of them why they agree. None of them would know why they agree. They just do, and like no one, like it's so frustrating. Oh, Spartan theology. Dr. Josh is such a joke. I've never even heard him explain how he psychologized the primary instances of the mathematical ancient Near East laws. That's so true. That's so true.
And you got to choose the right words. Big words are very difficult to pronounce. So people and you then say it really fluently, and you go, oh, shit, he actually can say these words. They're big words. But we're going to keep it simple, you and I, David, today. We're not going to use big words. So let's continue that conversation. 16, you've got the keys to the chapel. You're trying to convert. You're trying to save your mates. You reckon they're going to hell. The naughty shop around the corner, you were very happy. It was gone, but then it was actually getting bigger with more chains.
Only years prior did I go in there with my stepbrother, pretending in our school uniform, pretending we were 18 to try and buy pornography or whatever. So like it's so how times change. But yeah. So I mean, like I guess I was a very passionate Christian, and I became a Christian because I had what I would call a spiritual experience or some sort of experience at the youth group that I went to, and I felt like a changed person. And I felt that the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulders. I was a Christian for many years. I decided to do a youth ministry, get involved in the youth ministry, and then I eventually became I went through ministry college, and then I did that for a year. I got a certificate in Christian ministries and leadership. I think it's just Christian ministries, but it could be. I did something with leadership. It's a while ago, and then after that, my youth pastor heard God tell him to leave the youth ministry and go start a church down in Sydney. And he had a bunch of prophetic words tell him to do that. So he packed up his family and sold their house and moved down to Sydney to start that church. And they needed to find a youth pastor to take over. And he recommended me. The senior pastor hired me. I was given to the care of the associate pastor, who is now the senior pastor of that church. The associate pastor straight away said he thinks I'm too young. And to be fair, I probably was. I was 19. And I was taking care of a ministry that was, sometimes we had like 115 youth rock up on a Friday night, and the church was only 200 people. So, I was taking over a big chunk of that. I would, and eventually I kind of got pushed out of that role, in a kind of Weasley way, I will say. But at the same time, at the same time, I don't know if I was doing the most amazing job either. So, like I said, I was young, and then I went on like a spiral downhill from there. I felt like God had told me to, had told me clearly about the youth ministry. I felt like it was the will of God for my life. I was big on the will of God, and I thought that
So,
that
David, is a
yeah.
question for you. I'll let you finish this in, but what if you were promoted instead of you pushing you out of that position? What if you were seen to be doing a fantastic job and they must have you and you have to assume more responsibility? Would you have been David of
I'd still,
today?
I'd probably still be there now, and I would have still
Mm,
had the same ideas I had about, um, like, you know what, like, just thinking about like, would I be with Amy? I don't think I would be with Amy. I don't think I'd have a son Atlas. I think I would either still be looking for a wife, or I'd have a wife, but my marriage would look very differently. I think I would have had a very typical Christian marriage where the husband is the one who's right, the woman submits to the husband
mm.
as the authority, and obviously I'd submit to the wife in certain instances, but essentially the man is the head of the household. I think would have had a marriage like that, and yeah, I don't know what else, like how else my life would be different, but I definitely I could still be in that role. You know, I've psychoanalyzed myself like so much about this part of my life, because it was really hard, like
Mm.
losing the job as a youth pastor and walking away from that. I used to say that with my leaders. I used to say that I felt like they were my disciples, and this isn't me being grandiose or whatever. But we were a very close bunch. We prayed together. I cared a lot about them, and I promised them green pastures, and I left them in mud. So like only a year after I left the youth ministry, the youth was down to like 15 people or 20 people coming on a Friday night. So like it dropped significantly in numbers. There was a petition started to bring back David on MySpace or Facebook or something. Like someone created a Facebook group. It was it wasn't a good time, but it was really really rough, to be honest, going through all that. But I've lost my train of thought. Forgot what I was going to say. Sorry. But yeah,
So,
it was tough.
so that difficult time, then it triggered you. Did you feel a little bit angry, and then were you then motivated to find holes, or
No,
something was already brewing in the background?
I couldn't instantiate the necessary preconditions for impossible impossibilities. No, I so actually, what happened after that was, and I haven't really told this part of my story a lot, but I thought that I got involved. Like, okay, so let's just wrap up. Not wrap up. Sorry, we can go over time. It's totally fine. I'm having a good
Sure.
time, and my roommates are here, but we. So I went through the stage where I got really depressed, and I remember sneaking into I didn't drink. I did all my drinking before 16, before I became saved. So, but I didn't drink. But my friend had alcohol, and I started just like sneaking a little bit before bed, and then I'd go to sleep. Now, I never consider myself like an alcoholic or anything like that, and I think I was definitely like playing the role of like someone who was spiraling out of control at the time, because it didn't really do much for me. But then a friend moved into the house that we're living in, and he was smoking weed all the time. And he's like, "Do you want to smoke some weed?" And I was like, "What does it do?" And I never smoked weed before, and I ended up smoking weed with him. And then it made me incredibly anxious when I wasn't high. So I would start smoking cigarettes, because that would give me a head rush and I'd feel like I was high. My life was like I was just making bad decisions, and I think I was playing the role. This is me psychoanalyzing myself, playing the role of someone who was spiraling. Um, I moved down to Sydney to do film school. I tried to kick my addiction to weed after only smoking it for about 5 weeks. I went to AA meetings and everything. Like I was like serious about like I'm trying to pull my life together. It's I had this like narrative of like, and this is something I want to talk about too. Is this narrative of like the church doesn't give you the ability. There's that story of like the prodigal son leaving, losing everything, and coming home. It doesn't give you the ability to look at life with balance. Oh, I smoked weed for a few weeks. it's probably not healthy to do that. If I don't want to do that and it's causing my life harm, maybe I should not smoke weed for a few weeks. Or maybe I should like pump the brakes on that a little bit and focus on my studies or focus on getting a job or something. But instead, it was like either a hot or a cold, right? So I'm in Sydney, and same thing. I started smoking weed again, and this time I'm starting to hear things when I'm a little bit stoned. I was so broke that I couldn't afford the antidepressant medication that I was given, so my brain was going a bit loopy, and I started thinking that I was going like mentally insane. And I also thought that because I was a man who liked boobs, I must be a sex addict, even though I never really had sex. So I was like, I need to go to a rehab because I'm hearing things. I might be going schizophrenic. And I went to a rehab for 90 days. So
What, for liking boobs or?
for what?
Is it for liking boobs or what?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It was essentially like I was like, I need to get a handle on this sex addiction I have, even though
You serious? I was actually joking.
Yeah.
Really serious.
No,
Oh my God.
100%. This is what I mean.
Wow.
This is the mentality I have. I don't know if you can have a sex addiction if you don't have sex. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I was also like, I was doing a lot of weird stuff. Like, I was staying up all night. One night I was angry, so I punched a bus stop. I had like bloody knuckles. Like, I was playing the narrative of someone who was spiraling. It was so weird. And of course, dropping medication like that is not a good idea. And and then staying up all night, not having a job. Like, I was just spiraling a lot. And it wasn't my idea to go to a rehab, by the way. It was the lady I was living with. She said, maybe you need to go to a rehab when I came in with like bloody knuckles. She's thinking, who is this guy? Like it looks a lot worse than it is. So I decided to go to a rehab, and I did 90 days in this rehab. And so you do 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm sitting there next to someone who just got out of jail for 12 years. I'm sharing a roommate with someone who's might be getting he was younger than me, who was getting going through the courts for maybe attempted murder because he tried to throw a rock in someone's head. Like all this, like I'm with these people who are like they should be in rehab, and I'm there like, I smoked weed for a few weeks and I like boobs, like, and everyone's like, what the, like, they were all like so confused why I was there, and even I was confused. But I was there for like 90 days, and I started writing Amy, who was a friend, letters. So Amy is my wife now, and she's like she was like repairing her relationship with God. So when I say we're friends, when I was spiraling, she was also going through a really rough time, and we started hooking up. So we were friends, and we hooked up a couple of times. We didn't have sex or anything, but we hooked up. And then when I was in rehab, we started writing each other letters, and I was like, I'm getting my life back together. I couldn't have a phone or anything in there.
So you were about 17 or 18, or was it 19?
No, this time I'm like 22.
So you're 22. Okay, so
yeah, okay. I'm still like, the spiraling took a long time. Like, I really lost my way, and I left film school and everything, but to go to rehab. But I was in this rehab, and I'm writing her letters, and she would spray it with her perfume, and I would spray it with my Lynx Africa or whatever disgusting deodorant I had at the time. My letters, and we would write each other letters, and naturally, like this, these feelings started to develop, and I said to her on the phone when I had phone privileges, I said, hey, like, I'm getting feelings for you. I don't know what that means. And she said, me too, but God's my number one priority. And I said, great, that's where I'm at. God's my number one priority. And from there, I decided to read the New Testament cover to cover. I decided to approach life with more balance. So, one of my songs on my iPod would be Planet Shakers or Hillsong, and the next song would be, I don't know, Metallica or Insane Clown Posse or something just like that, and something very opposite. And I would still
matters.
yeah, and I'll be okay with that. Like, back in the day, I would never listen to non-Christian music, and I was okay with that. I was trying to approach life with more balance. And anyway, long story short, I ended up coming up to Queensland. I'm back to Queensland, and with the plan of going back to Sydney to start film school again. And I decided to stay up here, and I started going to church. The old church I used to go to every week. I started to really push into God. Amy and I decided to start dating, We actually waited until our wedding night to sleep together for the first time. Like, we were pretty committed Christians. And there's a whole like B plot in there about I actually I probably should say it anyway. But eventually we got married, and then it wasn't until shortly after we were married that I started to question everything.
So what age were you now married? 24?
So I was 25 when we got married. It was like a month after a few days after my 25th birthday.
Okay.
So, but what happened in the meantime of that is I was dating Amy, and I was, and I talk about this on my YouTube channel. It's called My OCD Story. And this is probably one of the most pinnacle moments of my life. So I was making Amy a jewelry box in my dad's workshop, and I was struggling really bad with anxiety. When I left film school and I was going to church, I was asking people for deliverance. I thought I had demons or something, and I would go to counselors. I would go to pastors. I would have lunch with the worship leader. I would have lunch with the associate pastor. I was friend, the person who essentially got me fired. I was friends with all of them. I was back there at the church, just trying to get connected in again and stuff like that. And I remember having all these issues, and my anxiety got so bad that I was throwing up like most nights. I was pacing up and down the street. I was having panic attacks a lot of the time. Every day I would be scared to come out of my bedroom. I was just a mess. And I remember I decided I was going to make Amy a jewelry box, and putting my mind to something that was not about me would make something better. So I was making her this beautiful jewelry box for her birthday or something, and in my dad's workshop. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to go to that place with God again. I'm going to go to that deeper place with God that I've kind of been too scared to go to because I've hardened myself. So I put on some worship music. I pressed play. I started praying, and I heard this booming voice, not audibly, but I felt this booming impression say, "Break up with Amy." And I thought, and I was like, whoa, immediately I was taken aback. I was like, what do you I was like, this is crazy. I had a panic attack. I ran out of the workshop and vomited in the garden. And I was so scared. I was like, this is the voice of God telling me to break up with Amy. I couldn't justify why. Why would God want me to break up with Amy? Everything was going well. We were pushing each other towards God. As you can see, I'm worshiping God in my workshop because I'm thinking of her. It was very much, we're doing things very correctly. Even when we watched a movie together, we had to watch a movie together, and I text a friend in the worship, someone, one of my mentors at church, and said, "Hey, just so you know, the movie is this long, and I'm going to text you when it finishes. So there's no chance of us hooking up afterwards. And I'm gonna call you and be like, yo, what's going on? We've watched the movie now." So I was being very accountable. I was doing everything I could correctly. I'm rambling a little bit. Sorry. Anyway, my stepmother and my dad asked me, go see a psychologist. Please go see a psychologist. And everyone at church was saying, no, that doesn't sound right, that God wants you to break up with Amy. That doesn't sound like, God wants to bring people together, not pull them apart. And she seems good for you, and you seem good for her. And this doesn't seem, even pastors were telling me this. And my stepmom and my dad were saying, go to a psychologist. Just please go to a non-Christian psychologist, not a Christian counselor, a psychologist, and they're not going to hurt you.
Sorry to interrupt. Your family, immediate family, your father and
my stepdad, my stepmom, and my dad.
Were they Christian?
No. Well, no, I don't think so. I wouldn't call them Christian. No.
Right.
My stepmom's very into Eastern kind of philosophy, Eastern religions, Buddha and Hindu and stuff. And my dad, I guess he was a Christian at one stage. I guess he's got a very open mindset. But they weren't fundamentalist or anything. They tell me to go to this psychologist. I go to the psychologist. His name's Chris, amazing guy. And we sit down, and the first time I'm there, it's just a checklist. He's like, how do you feel when this happens? And he's writing stuff down. And I'm like, this is so nothing. This is boring. Of course, the world has no answers. This is silly. He books in another session with me. I go back to the second session thinking, this is going to be a waste of time, but I'll go along to it. And he says to me, I want you to say out loud, what if God wants me to break up with Amy? And I was like, whoa. I was like, no, I can't say that. I can't say that. And I said, because, and I started preaching to him. I was like, because the Bible says that there's life and death in the power of the tongue. I can't say that, because what if I like run with it? What if I like push past you, I run out the door, and I like call someone, and I'm like, call Amy, and I'm like, we're breaking up. And he's like, would I be a good psychologist if I let that happen? And I was like, oh, I can't. He's like, say it. And I'm like, eventually I argued with him for a bit, and eventually I was like, what if God wants me to break up with Amy? And this anxiety just builds like crazy. And he's like, good, say it again. I'm like, what if God wants me to break up with Amy? And more anxiety. Say it again. What if God wants to break up with Amy? And it's just building and building. I've said it now like 15, 20 times, and I'm having a panic attack. I'm looking for a bin in his office to vomit in. And he's like, say it again. And I was like, and I'm like, honestly, I'm panicking. He's like, say it again. I'm like, what if God wants to break up with me? He's like, say it again. What if God wants to? And I'm just like, repeating. And then all of a sudden, he's like, say it again. And I'm like, what if God wants me to? And it was just like, click. And it was like, all of it just went, it just disappeared. And I thought, what? And I went, what if God wants him to break up with Amy? And he's like, say it again. I was like, what if God, I'm like, this is so stupid. And he's like, say it again. I'm like, what if God wants to break up with Amy? He's like, say it again. And all that fear, all that anxiety, all that panic, everything just left me in an instant. Honestly, like a shaman.
What changed then? What happened? What did you
think?
Like,
I was diagnosed with OCD.
Right.
So what I was going through was I had pure OCD. It's essentially like an obsession that I have that I can't get rid of. And when I was avoiding that idea in my head because I had this intrusive thought, which was God saying, which I thought was God saying.
The more you try to avoid it, it lingers.
Yeah, the more you push it away, the more it comes back louder.
Yeah.
So I had done very good at pushing away for so long that it was so loud that all I needed to do is just turn and face it, and it just lost all its power. And
it was, Chris.
And I couldn't believe it. And it was like, and I thought to myself, like, I had Christians tell me what you're going through is 50% spiritual and 50% mental and things like that. Like, or this is a spiritual attack. But it was all gone. And of course it came back and it came back in other areas as well. Other areas is, what if I have got a terminal illness? What if I spontaneously become gay and then it ruins my marriage? Like that was like, what if I'm gonna like one day be like, oh, I didn't realize I'm actually gay, and then it wasn't that it was that I was gonna hurt Amy's feelings like that, and I'm like, I don't want to go dancing. I don't like dancing. Like there's all these like weird connotations I had with being gay that I was like, I have to go dancing at the beat in Brisbane. Like there's a lot of really weird tics that I had. And yeah, a psychologist really did wonders and help with all that. It was amazing. But essentially, yeah, with OCD, it was like that. But what I discovered in all of that is that what I thought was the voice of God, what I was pretty sure was the voice of God, was an intrusive thought. And then I thought to myself, what else if I thought was the voice of God that was just an intrusive thought or just something else? And then I thought, and I was like, well, if that was a voice, yeah, like what else how do I work out stuff? And then I realized that my favorite saying became feelings aren't facts. That was my favorite saying at the time. And I know it's like associated with Ben Shapiro kind of thing now, but at the time, like I would feel like my world's falling apart. It doesn't matter. It may feel like that, but that's not factual. What's factual is you've got a new job, you're nervous about it, things are going well, you've got a new, I look at things factually rather than how I was feeling.
Well, for your information, so you feel comfortable, Ben Shapiro hasn't, he's just, recirculating. David Hume long ago said something to the same effect. So it's not Ben Shapiro.
Oh, no way. That's so cool. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
It's very old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was what was kind of happening, and then in that process, I decided that I couldn't trust my internal like measuring stick, like my internal, like God's telling me that this is the case. I wanted to objectively measure things. I wanted to find out what was true based on evidence, and it was like one of these things that it just felt like so silly not to realize this, but it's like, well, of course, like anything that's true, you should be able to point to evidence. Like you might get there with intuition, like you might feel like this is the right answer, and then it ends up being the right answer, and that's totally okay. But there should be information that you can find that tells you it's the right answer before you need to use intuition. So I stopped caring about intuition, which was the opposite of what you kind of taught and trained with in Pentecostal Christianity. And I started going, okay, well, what does the Bible say? What, is the earth 6,000 years old, or is it millions of years old? Is evolution true? I watched the discussion with Bill Nye and Ken Ham. This is years after,
I remember that one.
Yeah, and it's one of my questions at the end of Deep Drinks. What, if anything, would change your mind? Ken Ham, nothing. I start with the Bible. Bill Nye, evidence. And I was like, I don't know. So that's a very, sorry, I felt like I ranted for a long time there, but that's a condensed version of my story. Yeah, it's like essentially I started to investigate claims, and then here's the other thing is I started noticing that the ideas that were just like a fun game for Christians to play and myself to play were causing like real world harm to people. So I had a friend, he was the first guest on Deep Drinks, and he said to me, once, like, what do I do when my parents die? Do I just kill myself? And I was like, whoa, no, absolutely not. Like that's horrible. And he's like, well, I've got no one. And the reason he had no one is because he was a gay man who was in the closet because he was a Christian and he'd never been with anyone. And he was 45 years old, and he was just, and he felt that God didn't want him to be gay. And he tried to pray the gay away so many times, it just never worked. He went to therapy, it never worked. He read books, it never worked. So it became this, Bill Nye has zero evidence.
I was gonna comment on, it depends on what. I mean, if it's evolution, then it's not Bill Nye's evidence. It's the science evidence. But what I've listened to you, David, quite attentively, because your story is so telling. It's very personal, and I'm glad that I've got to know you a bit better today. But it's almost the same story of a lot of religious people about that inner voice, whether it's God's, or God is nothing but another representation of themselves within themselves. You were just hearing yourself. You were hearing your by the way, I'm OCD as well.
Aren't you a vegetarian as well, or a vegan or something?
Yeah.
We have a similar brain.
Yeah. So, but I use it and I think you started to use it. You can use it to your advantage for project and productivity. Like you and I probably will smash things within 24 hours that people will take weeks to do because we get so obsessed with a project.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I use it for my advantage now. I know I live with it. One of the cool things about humans is nobody's like, oh yeah, this guy's got issues. We all have issues, my dear. The human brain, subject to all these experiences and all the environmental exposures and everything, we bound to have issues one way or another. There's no such thing as 100% sane. You've got issues. The brain is the product of evolutions over hundreds of millions of years, and therefore they're bound to be issues. What you want to do is you want to take these experiences, you can accept yourself for who you are, and start, if life gives you lemon, make lemonade. That's what I've been doing. I've got a personality that's directing me in a certain way. I try to avoid the negative sides that comes with that personality, and then emphasize the areas where it's a bit more positive. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, and like I've found like tremendous relief from the OCD and stuff through therapy. Like it's not even a thing that sometimes I'll go through, like Amy will be like, oh, what's I'm like, oh, just OCD stuff, and like I'll have a few days where it's like
laugh it off.
I'll get an intrusive thought, but most of the time it's like I'm pretty good. Yeah, good, come a long way, that's for sure.
A lot of geniuses, like poets and scientists have issues like that.
Yeah, Nikola Tesla was like crippled by OCD, right? Yeah.
So
absolutely. What you're saying is, I'm a genius. Thank you. I'll take that, and I'll finish off the last little bit of the scotch.
But I'm so glad. I mean, your story is quite telling. So you then realized that this was your voice all along, and you're in probably 26 by then. Is it sort of taking a year after you married?
Hang on. It was probably around there's one last like little chapter in this story that it was around I think it was 2017. So we went on a world trip. That played a huge role as well, seeing like how big the world was and stuff. And you know how people had different cultures, different ideas, different beliefs, and they seemed all fine. they were all getting along, especially Japan. Japan was quite secular, and Japan was quite put together. They weren't falling apart. And one thing that one of the last things that happened was on the way back from this world trip, we stopped in Thailand, and I decided to buy Bill Nye's book, which was about essentially a debate with Ken Ham. It was like his book after that, and I posted it on Facebook like I'm reading this, like, and it was like I was testing the waters. Is everyone going to hate me for reading a book on evolution, or like what. And no one seemed to care or notice, which is cool. Anyway, I started looking into it, and I started looking into it more and more and more. And I noticed that me and Amy were like splitting in our worldviews. Like I was going to be so different to her if I continued down this path. And I just needed her to understand me. And I didn't want her to be on my same path or anything. I just needed her to understand me. So I sat down one time and I said, hey, like, I'm worried that we're going to have very different perspectives about life, and we're not going to be able to understand each other. I said, I don't need you to follow me down this path or even question anything with me. I wasn't even questioning my faith at the time. I was just looking at the evidence for evolution and creationism. And I said, but I would love if, you would if I could at least tell you about what I'm learning. And she said, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. And I want to support you. And like, I think it's awesome. And I was like, cool. But little did I know that how serious she took that. And she bought myself and her tickets to a faith and science talk in Brisbane at the World Science Festival in 2017. And we went along, we met up with some friends, and we went and saw this faith and science talk. And on stage there was a Buddhist, a Muslim, like two types of Christians, and maybe a Hindu. There's a bunch of different denominations of religion. They all said there was no problem with their faith and science, that there was no issue, with it. It all lined up perfectly. And there was one person at the end that they asked his opinion. And he said, I know now that I've just come, in his British accent, he said, I know now I've just come here to disagree with everyone, because we've been brought here to disagree with everyone because I disagree. He said, faith and science cannot coexist, because faith starts from a presupposition of believing something without evidence, and science does everything it can to prove itself untrue. It tries to prove itself wrong. And if it doesn't, if you can't prove it wrong, that's a good explanation at that point. That person was AC Grayling.
AC Grayling, brilliant.
Yeah.
And
yeah, great guy. We, he's the only one I connected with. And at the end, Amy went to the bathroom, and I was like looking at his books. He was the only one popular enough to actually have books to sell. And there's this book called The God Argument, and it had nothing to do with what I thought it was. It was about humanism, essentially. But I picked it up and I looked at it, and I was like, God, and I was like, a God book. I'm gonna go purchase this book. And I went to purchase the book, and I felt like some profound form of blasphemy to be purchasing an atheist book, or a book from an atheist. And I went up to him, and Amy came back, and I put it down, and I said, hey, I started rambling, kind of like I am now. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I was like, I'm a Christian, but I'm questioning things. I believe it's, important to have intellectual honesty. And blah, blah, blah. He stopped signing the book, and he looked up at me, and he just said, how are you going? And I was like, oh, it's hard, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, how are you going emotionally? And I was like, oh, and he took time with me, and like he asked me questions, and he said, I take my hat off to you. It's not everyone can question their belief systems, especially if they were brought up that way. Like, good on you. And no matter where you end up, I think it's great to question what you believe and why. And I was like so blown away. I was kind of fumbling, and I said, oh, well, I'll read your book and I'll let you know what I think about it. And he goes, okay. And then he goes, I'll write my email. And he wrote his personal email at the back of this book. Yeah, I still got it. And we walked out of there like blown away that this person would be so kind like that, and they weren't even a Christian. How weird. And I've never emailed him yet, but I will one day. I haven't emailed him yet, but I will one day. But we left and we're walking down the stairs, and it's like Amy like got it at that moment, and she said to me, "I think what you're doing is good," and those words just like just rang in my brain. Like, I think what you're doing is good. And she said, I think it's important to question what we believe and why. And it was that moment that I felt like I had the full freedom to question my faith, to look at the evidence and go where the evidence led. Because
deep down you'd be quite afraid to venture out too much, you lose your marriage. So somehow that liberated you. Now you know that you're backed up by your wife.
Yeah. And not only that is like, it's like, I wanted to get to the truth because of what I was taught in church. Like, I was taught in church that truth was the most important thing, that you were to pursue it, that you were to seek truth, that you were not to lie and you're not to be dishonest. And that's what I like. Once you see that crack in the evidence, you can't like just pretend. You can pretend it's not there, but that's lying. You can cover it up with some putty, but you know the crack's there. Like, and you have to work out either why that crack is there, if it even is a crack. You just have to go deeper. And the deeper I got, the bigger the gap got. And eventually I'm in a canyon looking at and going, this is a huge crack. And the worst part is like, I would have this and they'll see this crack, and I'll be in this canyon going like, this is a huge problem in my faith. And I would bring it to my fellow Christians as like a huge, like a problem, like, hey, like I need your help. Like, tell me, like, how can we resolve this? And what I found was, and this made me so upset. What I found was they either didn't care or they were extremely dishonest. Like, they were so dishonest. And this isn't me poo-pooing them. Michael Granado, amazing guy.
Hey, Michael.
Good friend.
Yeah, like Michael.
Michael's a great guy. People should go subscribe to Michael. He's got amazing content. There's I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, they didn't care, but they also were being extremely dishonest. And I'm not like poo-pooing other Christians. I would have done the same thing. But at the time, like when I was a Christian, I realized that mental gymnastics, the gymnastics you do to save your faith, is part of the spell. It's the spell of Christianity. It's the spell of Islam. It's the spell of most faith-based communities. It's like faith makes you protect your belief system, and as a result, people get hurt. Like I'm having a conversation in a couple of days with Chrissy Hansen about should we platform bad faith actors, or not bad faith actors, like bad people, Nazis. Should I bring a Nazi on to talk about white nationalism or something stupid like that, right? And initially I'm like, no, like I don't want to have a Nazi on. I don't want to have a Nazi on. But like the more I think about it, I'm like, do you know, like a Nazi isn't doing as much damage to the world right now as Christians and Muslims. Like I know that, like, but hear me out. And you brought up a good point with the Muslims, and this is where I'm getting my information. But Christianity is the driving force behind the new anti-LGBT laws in Uganda, which my friend Pepe Onzima is now, will be in prison for 10 years or put to death for being trans. If you're a serial homosexual offender, it's a death sentence. It's 10 years in prison for same-sex kissing or touching or anything like that. And that is a direct, like you can draw it out, like it's a direct propaganda from the Christians that come over from America and the Christian movements in Uganda that have forced those laws through. So Christianity in Uganda is doing way more damage than any Nazi has in any other country in the world post World War II, right? Like, and then with Muslims, like you mentioned when you came on Deep Drinks, is like Muslims like are literally disparaging half the world's population, women, right? And you said like Quran 434. It gives women black eyes in China and breaks their ribs in the Middle East. Like it's not okay. So like no Nazi has that reach, that influence. So it's like if I'm not to platform a Nazi, or if someone's not to have a conversation with a Nazi, should we be having conversations with Christians? Should we be having conversations with people in Islam? Like it's a really like it's a big thing.
To me, it's an ideology. Ideology
Yeah.
comes from the root word idea. To stop an idea is you have to oppose it with another idea. To not to not give them a voice to discuss, that means they are going to stay in the dark. And bad ideas that stay in the dark fister and multitude. The best thing or the worst thing you can do to bad ideas, dark ideas, is to shine the light on them. I want to give them a platform. I want to show them, showcasing them, and I want to, destroy their predications and the way they build up their case using logic and using common sense for everyone to see. Banning drugs isn't going to make drugs. It's going to make drugs more popular. Look at
you go buy drugs from someone who's got like you're buying weed from someone who's got like the motivation to hook you on meth because they sell meth and it's more expensive. It's not good.
It's that underground world that you want to evade, because that where bad idea gets a lot bigger and spiral out of control while you're not seeing it. If the Nazi started with a nationalistic ideology that's based on compassion. That's how it started.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Yeah, and it sounded very much like that just then that I was sticking up for Nazis. No, fuck Nazis. I definitely don't.
Like no, of course we're not sticking up for that sort of thing. Yeah, but to say to cancel them, that's not the solution. They're not going to go away.
But so. And this is kind of I guess above the pay grade of the conversation, or above what we were talking about. But what do you say to someone who then like, so have you seen the amazing new it's like a 2-hour kind of video essay by ContraPoints, I think it is, and she did it on J.K. Rowling. It's called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling.
I haven't, but I'm aware of J.K. Rowling, obviously the writer of Harry Potter, and how the way she thinks about certain controversial topics.
So there was a really great video by ContraPoints, and it changed my perspective on this, because I'll just drop it so people can watch it later. But I'll just drop it in the thing. Oh, I might not be able to because I'm not a mod, but let me put it in the private chat.
But if you put it in the chat, I can share it or something.
Yeah. So that video, like, so she brings up the concept that like some ideas can't be reasoned with. Some ideas need to be like violently, or they need to be like removed from society. Like having someone on to discuss like what do you think about this? Like having someone on to discuss like how many Jews died in the concentration camps in World War II. That almost has no upside, because the people who research that are like you can throw evidence at them and they'll have like a workaround for every evidence. So like you could say like, well, here are some documents, blah blah blah, and they go, oh, do you know that person was actually, his name, he was married to this person who was like a known liar, and like here's some documents. Like they have like an answer for everything, and there's like this big white supremacist anti.
But David, how's that any different from Flat Earther, who's got an answer to everything, and who is a 6,000 years old young Earth creationist or flat? All these people have the same thing. But what are you trying to do when you have them on your platform? Is not for them to be convinced. It's for their followers, for potential followers, for those who are on the fence. And there's like, oh, I'm leaning towards that. And then you start showing evidence. They go, oh, after seeing all this evidence, I'm not going to follow that person. That person becomes weaker because they're going to end up being isolated on their own. If you leave them to their own device, we live in a world where you are a media person. You can start your own YouTube channel and your Twitter and you've become you have a platform. You don't need to deplatform people. You can start your own platform. The right wing is huge amount of people. You look at the United States, it's split almost 50-50. So the one thing you can do is an educational. It's exactly like what you did with your OCD. You have to confront it. If you go, it's not there, it will linger and it will fester.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing, right? So, like, let's say, okay, here's a good thing, right? And this isn't necessarily like about me, right? But like, let's say we can have a discussion about trans rights, for example, right? Trans women in sports or whatever, doesn't matter what it is. For us, it's like a fun chess game. Well, I imagine you're not trans or anything, right? Like, you're not trans. You cis male.
Yeah. You see, yeah. I don't like, but I see. You would actually be quite amazed. I don't like pronouns, so I would not call myself cisgender. Like somebody, I think it's a made-up, extra, superfluous thing. I happen to be born in the same sex that I think I am. So therefore, I don't need to create an extra layer. It's human construct. All of that is, but I go with what's the simplest way. I'm a heterosexual man. Done.
Okay. Well, so we can have a conversation about that, right? Like, and me and you, it could be like a fun chess game for us.
Yeah.
But for people who are trans, it's like directly affecting, like, there's legislation that's being pushed through because people will listen to our conversation and either be convinced or not convinced about that. And so I get concerned that if, like, let's say, like, it would be irresponsible for me to bring on like the world's best like flat earther to debate flat earth, even though flat earth isn't that bad of a harmful ideology, but like it would be irresponsible because I would be essentially convincing a lot of my audience.
I actually agree. And I agree with you on that, because flat earthers have been objectively proven to be wrong. We've got science to show that this is no longer an area of debate, but there are some debatable areas. Like, for example, whether should we give a platform to those we disagree with? I think this is not a done deal area. This is an area that's up for debate. Definitely, it's up for debate.
That's
not scientific. Yeah, it's a social thing. We're gonna have to live together. At the end of the day, there are 5 billion people who believe in things. We're gonna have to live with that. They're gonna have to live with us. We're gonna have to find common grounds. Unlike science, where it's objectively true or not proven by science, done. Questions done. But when it comes to social affairs, the spectrum between the black and white, there's like 500 million or infinity of colors in between, and this is the area of human discussion. I think we need to talk.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but what I'm kind of pointing out is, like, we stand in like like for us to engage in certain conversations, we stand in like a really big area of privilege where we're not affected either way by the conversation's outcome, but someone might be watching who is hugely affected by the outcome of our, like, literally of our conversation, because we sway opinion, we sway public opinion, and then it gets passed through the courts, and it's like one of those things. It's like with I feel like just with transgender issues, it seems like the new LGBT, like the new lesbians and gay, like most people accept gay people and lesbians exist. Back in the day, a lot of people didn't. A lot of people would just like bash them, like go around bashing them in the streets and stuff like that.
But I'll give an example. Transgender. What do you think about transgender biological men competing in women's sport?
I haven't looked too. I honestly, I haven't looked too much into it.
Yeah, so that's an area of debate. So you're talking about biological. Once you reach a certain age, you're set in your physique.
But here's the and again though, like I don't know enough about it, but we have that conversation. It doesn't affect us, but it does affect other people, and that's what my point was with the Christianity. You have all these people who are spreading this misinformation, or not misinformation, or at least faulty information about how homosexuality is an abomination, and they're spreading that through the zeitgeist because
I understand.
and then as a result, gay people lose out, and it's ridiculous. Like,
but a situation like I've just brought up, it's an area that touches both transgender and biological females. So if a transgender male to female competes in a female sport, they'll have the advantage.
Yeah,
they'll have the advantage.
Well, yeah. I'm like I said, I haven't looked too much into it, especially like with like, you know, is shooting a sport that they'll have the advantage? Probably not.
No, not shooting. Yeah, of course.
But like MMA, maybe. You know what I mean? Like this, but again. Well, you're talking to the wrong person. I think all sports are kind of bullshit in some regards. Like, when you get to the top levels of anything, you're playing a genetics game. It's like some sort of sick genetics game anyway, because like there's no way that I could ever be the best basketballer in the world, even if I train from like the
but it is scientifically proven that the male, so it's actually the male population of Homo sapiens are marginally stronger.
Of course. Of course. And like, but again, like what I was saying is like, you're talking to the wrong person, just because I think even just just sports is bullshit in a way.
But it's like an area. So I'll give you another example. A rapist, somebody who raped 2 women, then transitioned to be a transgender. I don't know if it's on purpose or not, to evade being sentenced, and now being able to enter women's bathroom, who raped 2 women before. So this is the sort of conversations we're having. That's a thing. It's not a done deal.
Okay, so there's so much going on here, and I'm a little bit drunk, so I apologize if I'm saying anything wrong. But one of the things that
so I can get even.
One of the things that I find is super interesting in this whole debacle is the conversation almost cannot be had publicly in good faith, with both sides hearing the conversation properly. So, for example, if I go on Twitter and go, the human female body is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, if I type that sentence, people are going to be like, yeah, Dave, like, cool, like, that's weird tweet, whatever. If J.K. Rowling said that, it all of a sudden has all this like it's like a dog whistle for like all these people who know what she's really saying. What she's really saying is like trans women aren't women. That the human that a cis woman is the best kind of woman, right? She's like saying all this extra stuff because it's attached to her like ideology. Or it's the same with Jordan Peterson. Like when Jordan Peterson says stuff like that.
And if I have them on my platform, I'll be saying, why? Please justify your position. Tell me why you think the way, and that's the beauty. I mean, because these things are not settled. These are within the human affairs. These are social constructs. They are not going to be science will inform. Science will give us information on that. But at the end of the day, we are going to have to settle this as Homo sapiens. We're going to find a common ground where it's reasonable for society to endure, to flourish, and to have justice and to have fairness and all these sort of things within reason. So that's why cutting these people from a conversation, because some people can be under misapprehension. You were under a misapprehension at some point. If I canceled you out for being a crackpot, then I'll be missing out on the Davids of today. Everyone has the ability to change their minds, provided with.
What about people who are like? What about people who are like just bad? Like Matt Walsh is like a bad faith actor at this point. People who have ulterior motives. People who
they'll be found out. Like, you know,
they are found out, but no one cares. Like, look at what Jordan Peterson, like what you can clearly see Jordan Peterson's motives behind what he says and what he does and what he believes. Not so much Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peterson a little bit, but Ben Shapiro. If he didn't have his religion, he probably wouldn't even be right wing like what he is.
Do you think Ben Shapiro is? I don't think Ben Shapiro is religious. I don't think Peterson is either. These guys are not religious.
They're definitely religious. They're definitely religious.
Jordan Peterson I don't think is religious for a second.
No, he's religious. I just don't know whether he believes in God. Like this is an interesting conversation that you talk about in Dan McClellan talks about in his book that I'm reading at the moment for an interview. He talks about like trying to find a religion. Like they determined that a religion is just anything that you believe, that anyone says is a religion is a religion. That's just it. You can't.
I think Peterson only utilizes religion because it's the one keeps the upholds the family values. He's afraid. He's more like a Nietzsche in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. When the Zarathustra came in the novel, says God is dead, and he wasn't celebrating. He was actually lamenting the effect of humanity that is not ready for the departure of God. So
and I think
Jordan Peterson is afraid of the repercussions of ignorant and less intelligent people abandoning God. He's intelligent. He's very intelligent. He doesn't need God. Trust me. He's given it to those who would rob him and maybe mug him on the street if they don't believe in one. Just like Voltaire said, I don't believe in God, but don't tell that to my servant because he might kill me while I'm asleep.
Well, that's the thing is I don't know. I don't know. I would still consider Jordan Peterson religious. I just don't know if he believes in God, or because I think that he attaches like the over encompassing ideas of his religion and calls that religion. Does that make sense? Like he, when you go like, do you believe in God? He's like, well, let's get to the brass tacks. He's like, what do you mean by do? What do you mean by believe? What do you mean by God? Like, he's like, it'll take 48 hours to even go through one of those. Like, it's like, what he's actually doing is he's making religion a lot more palatable for people who know that Noah's Ark is silly, and we've learned about evolution. He's turned it almost away from what religion traditionally was into like a way more palatable, like it's a system of beliefs. Like if you watch his series on like the Old Testament God, it's like it's not like he's saying like, oh, the Old Testament God is true. He's like talking about it as if like it's like stories and narratives and things that can help us.
He calls it the metaphorical truth. He believes in something called the metaphorical truth. It's the truth via stories. They don't have to be real, but they tell us and inform us about what's real, what's a family, what the values of a group, and things like that. So that's why I think he's utilitarian in terms of his aims about, because I don't think he believes in God. I believe he believes in the power of religion to keep masses of people together under control, and he's making money. Well, he's a content creator as well. Like he's got 2 million people on his channel, and or more, and he's telling the majority of the world what they want to hear. He also tickles the fancy of a lot of white wingers, while he's still a very good psychiatrist. Like he does when he talks about psychology, he says a lot of valid things. So it's very difficult to dissect this guy. He's got his own demons. He often cries in his own shows and breaks down in tears in a strange way.
But he's a little bit, I should just say, he's a partisan hack as well. Like you watch him, like, someone's like, what do you think about the incels? Like on some talk show, and he's like, oh, he's like the incel. He's like, they're just trying to get along. And then like on Twitter, he's just like, there's someone who's like non-binary or LGBT or whatever, and he's like, sorry, not pretty. Like fuck off with your and he's just so rude. And it's just like, how do you go from like, oh, the incels are so sad, they just want a male role model, and to like telling someone that they're like, to your millions of followers, that they're like disgusting or whatever, like I don't know. He's just the worst thing I've ever heard him say. Well, not the worst, sorry. He said a lot of dumb shit, but like the worst, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard him say is like, oh, well, I've read 50 books on climate change and I'm not convinced that it's man-made. It's like, what? It's like, dog, what information do you have that the climate scientists don't have? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you read 50 books? Like, what are these like climate scientists just like, we don't have access to these books. Like, I'm sorry. Like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I don't.
But you see what you're doing, David. Like, the way to stop nonsense, the way to stop pseudoscience is science. The way to stop myth is facts. So you will have to engage in that conversation. banning
But
people.
my point is, like, with that, sorry to interrupt, my point is essentially that for us it's a conversation. For others, they're imagine if like two people were having a conversation about you, right? Like about like who you are as a person, like, and trying to, like, one person saying, well, Hanny's a piece of shit and actually he's like a rapist and stuff, and then the other person's like, no, he's actually a good person. Like, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, this is
But,
affecting me. Like,
but is there any other way? This is how humanity, the history of humanity, advanced that way. Unfortunately, a lot of people have to endure, because if you make rash decisions about the person's um, um, uh, situation based on emotions, that's unfortunately that's how the brain works. If you want quick and very fast, they're called impressions. They're called emotional reactions. But if you want to ponder, reflect, look at the cons and the pros of a situation, unfortunately, it takes a bit longer. So when you're dealing with an emerging situation, we have, I mean, homosexuality has been around as long as, they're mammals. Outside of the Homo sapien species, we've got homosexual tendencies and things like that. So
not just
it's no
mammals,
longer,
heaps of animals.
yeah, heaps of mammals. And I'm very mindful that probably we're going to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes. If that's all right with you, David?
Yeah. I have the biological exuberance, homosexuality, and like the textbook on just gay animals. It's
yeah. I've had a full episode on displaying all the rams and the swans who are actually a lot of lesbian swans. And there is a reason. There is a very good biological reasons in evolution why homosexuality is there. It's not there to end the human population. Actually, if it made the human population flourish. So I think conversation is the way. Unfortunately, few people have to endure settling matters, because if you want to have longer effects and the bigger conversation, according to history, have been settled over, unfortunately, sometimes decades of conversations, of human conversations to end. Like, look at slavery. Why wasn't slavery ended in a heartbeat? Why it took a civil war, lots of conversations, debates in Europe for humanity only to start saying, "Oh, that's not going to fly," after hundreds of years? Because unfortunately, that's how it is with the human affairs. So you gotta have to engage in conversations, understand the cons and the pros, understand the underpinning science, history, and the repercussions of human population, the future of human. They're very nuanced conversations. Removing somebody who might be under misapprehension or paid to say what they're saying by certain lobbies is not going to do it's not going to improve the situation. I want to bring that bigot into my channel, and I want to scrutinize their point of view, and I'm going to ask them every step of the way, why you think that? Why do you think the way you think? Can you tell me what's the science behind this? What is the ethical grounding you have on this? And bring it to light.
Yeah, Michael Granado posted it's in the case of Holocaust deniers, the belief is actually being used to discriminate against a particular group of people that is not inherent in positions.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
It is. Yeah. It's what I try and do on my channel is I try and have responsible conversations. So I try to make sure it's always responsible.
Yeah. So we're talking about human beings here. So the conversation is going to be, we're talking about the earth, the shape of the earth. But when it comes to matters, when it comes to other human beings, we have to be extra careful, because we're talking about lives and lives are ruined. It's not just taking somebody's life; it's actually emptying them of their energy or their creativity. Look at Alan Turing, the godfather of computers, who was chemically incastrated by the UK for being gay. That's why the Apple symbol is a tribute to Alan Turing, who took his own life, and he probably saved the lives of millions of people because he solved the Enigma code in the Second World War, and ended up having to take his own life because he was not accepted by his own people for being something that he did not even choose. Uh, so things like that. That's shame on humanity. We need to learn from that. Things like that. Transgender, yes, okay. It's becoming a big thing. People are transitioning. People are free to express themselves. But let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about how this is going to play out. Listen, if you're a rapist, if you raped 3 women and you transition and you become a transgender female, you're going to have to probe the motivations. Is this person is trying to evade child, or they're actually, so things like that. And we know humans are quite creative about trying to get around loopholes and things like that. So we're going to just need to be smart about it. Let's have a conversation about sports. What do we do with sports? We know that male are stronger. What do we do? Because some normal other human beings will say, well, I couldn't win the 100-meter race. There is somebody who is taller, way taller and faster than me because of the way they were born. And you're going to have to entertain that conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I'm really sorry, Hani. I've probably got to go, but I really appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation. Just as the conversation was getting interesting too. But thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate you listening to my story and coming out. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Look, this is not going to be the last conversation. I think we're going to probably have a few bouts about it. So I think you and I are very enthusiastic about a few issues, and I think it will a lot of interesting conversation. Maybe we should have a panel at some point where other people from different points. I mean, this is wonderful. That's exactly what you want out of a conversation. Maybe a couple of transgender people with us to tell us about things you and we will never understand because we're not them. That is what I'm interested in. Thanks very much, and have a good night.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Thanks very much. Cheers.